Hey guys, this is Johnny, and in this video I'm going to build the complete animation system for this project. The third person controller already had idle, walk, strafe, run and roll animations. In this project I'm going to build over that system and add more states and animations. Before I show you the animation tree, I'm going to draw a diagram so you get a clear understanding of what I'm doing. First and most obvious two states are on ground and in the air. Then we have crouching and standing upright. And as this is a shooter project, we'll have a holster state when the player has no weapon and another state with weapon. There is also aiming and not aiming states that we worked on in the previous project. The crouching and standing states are gonna work only when the player is on ground. And while in midair, the player will have two different animations, jumping up and falling down. While standing upright, the player is gonna have idle, walk, strafe and run animations, which we also covered previously. The crouching state is also going to have idle, walk, strafe animations, but not the run animation, as we're not going to make the player run while crouching. All these states can fall under the holster state, and the aiming and not aiming states are going to be true when the player has a weapon. Of course, we need this side to be filtered so that the weapon animations affect only the hands of the player, not the whole body. This way, we can have both holster and weapon animations in all of these states. We can have the roll animation after this, as the roll animation overrides all of the animations. I've made a few more animations for this project and created a newer version of the player model. I've already imported the model in Godot, so I'm just going to delete the older model and put the new model here. I'm also going to delete the animation player, as I'm going to use the animation player directly from the imported 3D model. To get access to the animation player, we need to make the 3D model editable. I'm going to set this one as the Anim player for the animation tree. So this is the animation tree we made in the previous demo. This one generates idle, walk, run animations with roll animation as a one shot, and a transition node with aiming and not aiming state. In the aiming state, the player has 8-way strafe animation, which we created with a blend space 2D node. So first I'm going to modify this one a little bit. I'm going to delete this time scale and move these nodes a little far away to get some room for new nodes. I'm also going to delete the walk animation and replace it with the blend space 2D node. I'm going to call this walk. And you can see we can generate exactly the same thing with this. But instead of having the walk to strafe transition in the animation tree, we're going to switch between walk and strafe in the code. So now I'm going to create a transition node for crouching and standing states with crossfade time as 0.2. I'm going to call this CS transition, which stands for crouch stand transition. On the crouching side, I'm going to create something similar to the standing part. I'm going to create a blend 2 and call this crouch IW blend, which stands for crouch idle walk blend. I'm going to add an animation for crouch idle, and for crouch walk, I'm going to add a blend space 2D like we did over here. I'm going to call this crouch walk. If I connect this to the output, you can see the player is crouching when we go to the crouch state. Inside the blend space 2D node, I'm going to add 9 animations, crouch idle at the center, and 8-way strafe animations on each of the directions. So you can see the crouch strafing works. So now I'm going to add another transition node for the ground and air states. I'm going to call this node AG transition, which stands for air ground transition. Now instead of making this transition node, you could make a third state on this transition node for the on air state, as the other two states are going to work in the on ground state. That would make the tree a little smaller, but you will lose the freedom of having different crossfade time for each states. As of the current 3.2.2 version that I'm using, the transition node doesn't support different crossfade times for individual transitions. As I want the freedom for different crossfade times for air to ground and crouching to standing, I'm going to use different transition nodes for this. So now I'm going to add a blend space 1D for the on-air animation. I'm going to call this jump blend. On the left side, I'm going to add the fall down animation, and on the right side, I'm going to add the jump up animation. In the code, we're going to change this blend value with the vertical velocity of the player, so the jump up and fall down animations are going to nicely blend with the vertical direction the player is going. So now I'm going to add a blend 2 and call it weapon blend. I'm going to use this node to layer the weapon animations on top of all those animations. I'm going to connect here the aim transition that we created previously. To layer the weapon animations, I'm going to enable filtering and enable all of the bones from shoulder to hand so that only these bones are affected by the weapon animations. I'm going to add the aim rifle animation and connect it over here. And I'm going to connect the idle rifle animation here. So now you can see the weapon animations are being layered with all the other animations. The aim animation will work fine with the idle walk or jump, but the idle rifle animation will not look good when the player is in the air. It would work with standing, idle and walk animations, but again when the player is running, it won't look very good. That's why I created two more animations with rifle, one for jump and another for run. I'm going to add a transition here which is exactly like the AG transition we created for jumping. I'm going to call this one AG weapon transition, and I'm going to connect the on-air rifle animation here. I'm also going to add a blend 2 to blend the idle rifle and run rifle animations. I'm going to call this IR rifle blend, which will follow the blend value of the IWR blend, where -1 to 0 is the idle and walk, which would be layered with the idle rifle animation whose blend value is 0. And the blend value for the walk to run is 0 to +1, which is exactly the range for idle rifle to run rifle animation. This would make more sense when I'm applying this in the code. As you can see, the rifle on-air animation is active now, and it works perfectly with the player's on-air animations. Also from -1 to 0, the player is blending from idle to walk, where the idle rifle animation is looking fine. And when the player starts to run, we can smoothly switch to the run rifle animation. There is also another thing I want to mention, which is, in the crouching state, the idle rifle animation is gonna look really bad. But fortunately, we can use the on-air rifle animation when in crouching state, which looks perfect with the crouching animation. You can see the aiming animation also looks good with the idle and walk animations. But we're gonna use inverse kinematics to refine the aiming animation. So we don't need to worry too much about the aim animation right now. So now I'm gonna add the roll animation at the end. But you can see, the roll animation has the player's both arms on the ground, which would look bad when the player has weapon. So I'm just going to delete this roll animation and add a blend space 1D and call it roll blend. Inside the roll blend on the position 0, I'm going to add the roll animation. And the position 1, I'm going to add the new roll rifle animation that I made. You can use whatever values you want here, but using 0 and 1 would come in handy later in code. So you can see the roll animation is working properly. And if I slow this down, you can see the player switches between animations smoothly. You could also use the Blend 2 node for this, which would work exactly the same way. I didn't use a transition node for this one because when you're using transition, if you switch from one state to another, the other one is going to play from start. So for example, if the player is rolling without weapon, and in the middle of the roll animation, if you switch to weapon mode, the roll animation is going to start over, which will definitely look like a bug. I'm going to show you what it looks like with the transition node. Here I have a weapon switching mechanism, which I'm going to show you in the later videos. You can see if I switch the weapon in the middle of the roll animation starts over. That's because the transition node makes the state start over without blending. That's why I use the blend space node, which blends the animations so that we can smoothly switch weapons in the middle of the roll animation. So we've made a fairly complicated animation tree, which generates idle, walk, run and also strafing for both standing upright and crouching down. Also jumping up and falling down animations and weapon animations that get layered on top of those animations. In the next video I'm going to show you the code to control the animations and also use inverse kinematics for the aim system. So see you in the next video.